You are now listening to the Vegan Stuff podcast with Caavakushi.
Hosting this podcast today are our two AI hosts, Sam and Kim. If you simply can't get enough of us, go to caavakushi.com and sign up for our vegan newsletter and get our free 7-day high-protein vegan meal plan. And we also have some good news. We will be releasing our first ever cookbook pretty soon, so stay tuned. Hey, don't forget to follow us on our socials too.
All right, so welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to be tackling a pretty provocative topic.
Yeah.
Elon Musk's recent statements on animal agriculture and climate change. So you guys have given us quite a reading list today. We have articles from Plant-Based News, ABS-CBN, EW, World Animal Protection, Sentient Media, and
it's a lot.
Even clips from Joe Rogan's podcast. So
Yeah.
It's a real mix of perspectives.
Quite a collection, and it really does set the stage for a fascinating discussion.
For sure.
I think what struck me immediately was just the boldness of Musk's claims.
Yeah.
You know, he flat out said that eating meat, especially steak, has zero impact on global warming.
Yeah, I remember reading that. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, isn't everyone saying we need to, like, reduce our meat consumption for the planet? And then here's Elon Musk. Like, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, he uses that word irrelevant quite a bit in his conversation with Rogan.
Really?
And Rogan himself doesn't seem to buy the idea that animal agriculture is a major contributor to climate change.
Interesting.
He seems to think that factory farming is the main culprit.
Got it. They both seem pretty convinced. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
especially Musk, I mean, with quotes, like, the animals are not going to make any difference to global warming.
Right.
None.
Then it's irrelevant.
It's not going to make any difference to global warming or CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, really, if people eat fewer steaks.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
Irrelevant.
Irrelevant. I want to just be super clear about that. You will not even be able to measure it.
Yeah.
That's how irrelevant it is.
Yeah.
So pretty strong words.
Strong words.
But, you know, we also have these sources kind of pushing back pretty hard, citing scientific studies and data.
Exactly. And that's where things get interesting.
Right.
Because when you dig into the science, a very different picture kind of emerges.
Okay.
While Musk focuses on CO2, the scientific community emphasizes the role of methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas that's released by livestock, particularly cattle.
Gotcha.
What's fascinating is that methane is about 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide in its first 20 years in the atmosphere.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Methane from cows is bad for the environment.
Yeah.
But is it really, like, such a big deal? Musk seems to think it's negligible.
Musk's irrelevant claim is where the science really pushes back.
Okay.
The Global Livestock Environmental Assessment Model, or GLEAM, for example, provides a really detailed analysis of livestock's environmental impact.
Okay.
Essentially, it helps us quantify just how much those burgers and steaks are contributing to climate change.
So it's like a climate calculator for cows.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, but also kind of terrifying.
It's definitely a powerful tool for understanding the impact of our food choices.
Right.
And it's not just GLEAM. Research from organizations like the FAO, cited by DW, shows that animal agriculture is responsible for a significant portion of global greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay.
Somewhere between 13 and 21%.
Wow.
Then there's a study published in Nature Climate Change,
Okay.
which finds that food consumption alone could add another degree Celsius to global warming
A whole degree.
by the end of the century.
Wow. That's definitely not insignificant.
Yeah.
And this all kind of makes Rogan's point about
Right.
factory farming being the sole villain a bit more complicated, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
While factory farming is undeniably problematic,
Yeah.
even so-called regenerative farming, which Rogan champions,
Right.
isn't a free pass.
Oh, really?
A 2018 Oxford study called Grazed and Confused found that even the best managed grazing systems can only offset a fraction of the emissions that cattle produce.
So even if all of our meat came from happy cows on idyllic pastures,
Right.
it wouldn't solve the problem.
Unfortunately not. The sheer scale of animal agriculture, even in its more sustainable forms, has a substantial environmental footprint.
Right.
This directly challenges Musk's assertion that reducing meat consumption wouldn't make a measurable difference.
Okay, so we've established that the science doesn't seem to support Musk's claims.
Yeah.
But there's another layer to this that I find kind of intriguing.
Right.
This idea that the push for reduced meat consumption is just propaganda.
Right.
Like, both Musk and Rogan seem to think there's an agenda at play here, that people pushing plant-based diets have some ulterior motive.
Yeah,
It's like they're painting a picture of this vast vegan conspiracy, like trying to control our plates.
Yeah.
But Plant-Based News actually makes a pretty interesting counterpoint.
Okay.
They argue that the meat industry has a much larger and more established lobbying presence than the plant-based food industry.
Interesting.
And when you look at the tactics used by the meat industry, that argument starts to hold water. I mean, think about campaigns like beef. It's what's for dinner.
Yeah.
Which has been running for decades.
Oh, I remember those commercials.
They always made those steaks look so juicy and delicious.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a classic example of how the meat industry has effectively shaped public perception and normalized meat consumption.
Got it.
And sentient media points to programs like beef and pork checkoff programs.
Okay.
Which are essentially marketing campaigns funded through mandatory fees on producers.
So even if you're a farmer who's not thrilled about these campaigns, you're still forced to contribute to them.
That's right.
Wow.
It's a system that heavily favors the meat industry's narrative.
Gotcha.
And on the flip side, the plant-based food industry is facing its own challenges.
Okay.
Sentient media highlights the recent decline in plant-based meat sales.
Yeah, I saw that.
Partly attributed to meat industry campaigns that label these alternatives as ultra-processed and somehow unnatural.
Interesting. So rather than a vegan conspiracy, it seems like the real propaganda machine might be on the side of the meat industry.
It's certainly a perspective worth considering.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like Musk and Rogan's concerns about propaganda might be misplaced.
For sure.
It kind of begs the question, though.
Yeah.
If Musk's position isn't supported by science. Or a neutral assessment of the situation, what's driving his stance?
That's a great question, and it leads us into potentially even murkier waters.
Oh, boy.
The realm of politics and influence.
Oh, yeah.
Especially given Musk's new role in the Trump administration. But I think that's a conversation for part 2.
All right, let's take a break.
Did you know we have a vegan search engine, a vegan forum, a vegan newsletter, and so much more coming soon? So why not check us out at Caavakushi.com.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
All right, so last time we left off with a pretty big question.
Yeah.
Why is Elon Musk this, like, champion of science and technology? So seemingly dismissive of the scientific consensus on animal agriculture and climate change?
Yeah, and it's not just like an academic debate anymore. With Musk's new role in the Trump administration. His views could have a very real impact on policy.
Yeah. That's the concern that a lot of our sources are raising. Musk isn't just like a billionaire tech CEO. He's now co-leading the Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah, his words carry weight.
Yeah.
And his actions could have far-reaching consequences.
Especially when you consider Trump's own history of climate denial. I mean, sentient media, for example, worries that Musk's views could hinder progress on climate action, particularly when it comes to agricultural policy.
Yeah, and it's not hard to imagine how that might play out. Imagine funding decisions, for instance. Currently, there's a lot of growing support for initiatives promoting sustainable agriculture. Including plant-based food production.
So you're talking about research grants,
right?
Subsidies for farmers who are transitioning to more climate-friendly practices.
Precisely.
Okay.
But with Musk's influence, we might see those funds diverted.
Okay.
Maybe more research goes into things like regenerative grazing, even though the evidence for its climate benefits is still mixed.
Right. We talked about that earlier.
Exactly.
So we might end up focusing on technological solutions like carbon capture,
right,
geoengineering, rather than making changes to our food system.
That's a distinct possibility.
Okay.
Musk has often expressed a belief in technology's ability to solve complex problems.
Right.
So he might see those types of solutions as more appealing.
Yeah.
More in line with his vision of progress.
But wouldn't that be risky, though?
Well.
Like, what if those technological fixes take longer than we have?
Right.
Or what if they just don't work as well as we hope?
That's the gamble.
Yeah.
And it's one that worries a lot of scientists and climate experts.
Okay.
They argue that we can't afford to wait for some miracle technology to save us.
Right.
We need to act now on multiple fronts. And that includes reducing our reliance on animal agriculture.
It's like we're hoping for a magical solution
Yeah.
while ignoring the more immediate, impactful changes
Why?
we could be making to our diets and agricultural practices.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Okay, good.
It's this tendency to focus on future possibilities rather than present realities
Right.
that often hinders progress on climate change.
It's like kicking the can down the road,
Yeah,
hoping that someone else will figure it out later.
exactly.
Yeah, and with climate change, that's a dangerous game to play.
It is.
I mean, the longer we delay, the more severe the consequences will be.
Absolutely.
We've already seen the effects. I mean, extreme weather events,
Yeah,
rising sea levels.
it's a pretty bleak picture you're painting.
Yeah.
Musk's influence, coupled with Trump's skepticism, could create a real roadblock to progress on climate action, especially in agriculture.
So is there any hope for a more positive outcome?
There is. We don't know for sure how Musk will choose to use his influence.
Okay.
It's possible that he'll be swayed by the overwhelming scientific evidence
Okay.
and maybe become a champion for sustainable food systems.
Okay, that would be a plot twist.
It would be a twist.
But I suppose it's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
I mean, Musk has surprised us before.
Exactly. And even if he doesn't become a full-fledged advocate
Right.
for plant-based diets, there are other ways he could use his influence for good.
Okay.
He could support research into alternative proteins
Okay.
or promote policies that incentivize more sustainable agricultural practices.
So it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that his involvement will be entirely negative?
Not at all.
Okay.
There's still room for optimism, for hope, that he'll use his platform to advance solutions,
Yeah.
even if they're not the ones that some people are advocating for.
Well, that's slightly less depressing than where we were a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
But I think it's important to acknowledge the potential downsides as well.
absolutely.
I mean, we can't just ignore the risks.
We can't ignore them.
Yeah.
It's crucial to be aware of the potential pitfalls and to hold those in power accountable,
Right.
regardless of their personal beliefs or affiliations.
So what can we as informed citizens do
Right.
to make sure that Musk's influence is used for good
Yeah,
and not for delaying action on climate change?
that's a great question.
I guess that's a good segue into part 3.
Did you know we have a vegan search engine, a vegan forum, a vegan newsletter, and so much more coming soon? So why not check us out at Caavakushi.com.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Elon Musk and his stance on animal agriculture and climate change.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, you know, the science, the politics, the potential for both positive and negative impacts.
Right.
So now I think it's time to talk about solutions.
Yeah.
What can we as individuals and as a society do to create a more sustainable future?
That's the big question.
Especially when it comes to our food choices.
Yeah, and it's easy to feel kind of powerless
Yeah.
when we're talking about these huge global challenges.
Right.
But I think it's important to remember that individual actions, when multiplied across millions of people, can create a powerful ripple effect.
Okay, so like, where do we start?
Right.
What are some concrete things that our listeners can do?
Well, one of the most impactful things is to reduce our own consumption of animal products,
Okay.
especially meat.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be an all or nothing proposition.
Right.
Even small changes like meatless Mondays
Right.
or simply choosing plant-based options a few times a week can make a difference.
I think a lot of people hear reduce meat consumption and they immediately think like, I need to go full vegan.
Yeah,
But it's really about making more conscious choices.
exactly.
Right.
It's about finding a balance that works for you and your lifestyle.
Yeah.
And the great thing is there are so many delicious
Yeah.
and nutritious plant-based options available these days.
Right.
It's easier than ever to explore new cuisines and find plant-based versions of your favorite dishes.
Yeah. I've noticed that even in my own city.
Yeah.
There's so many more vegan and vegetarian restaurants popping up, it seems like.
Yeah,
Plant-based eating is becoming more mainstream,
it really is.
which is encouraging.
And that shift is partly driven by consumer demand. When people start choosing plant-based options,
Right.
businesses take notice.
They have to.
They do. And that's the power of voting with our wallets.
Yeah.
By supporting companies that prioritize sustainability and ethical sourcing, we send a message that we care about these issues.
So it's not just about what we eat,
Right.
but also like where we buy our food from.
Absolutely. Pay attention to labels,
Okay.
research brands, and look for certifications that indicate sustainable practices. And don't be afraid to reach out to companies directly.
Oh, really?
Let them know that you're more likely to buy from brands that align with your values.
So like we're part of a feedback loop.
Right.
Shaping the market with our choices.
Exactly. But it's not just about individual consumer power. We also need to engage politically.
Okay.
That means contacting our elected officials,
Right.
staying informed about relevant legislation, and maybe even getting involved in local or national advocacy groups
Right.
working on these issues.
So we can't just sit back and hope that companies and governments will do the right thing.
We can't.
We need to be active participants in shaping policy.
Precisely. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is by voting.
Right.
For candidates who prioritize climate action and sustainable food systems,
Right.
our votes are our voices, and we need to use them to support leaders who understand the urgency of these challenges.
It all comes back to that idea of collective action, doesn't it?
It does.
Our individual choices matter, but they're amplified.
Right.
When we join forces with others who share our concerns.
That's the key takeaway.
Yeah.
We're not in this alone.
Right.
There are so many organizations, communities, and individuals working towards a more sustainable and just world.
For sure.
By connecting with these groups, sharing information, and supporting each other,
Right.
we can create a powerful movement for change.
Well, this deep dive has taken us on quite a journey.
Yeah, it has.
We started by exploring a controversy, Elon Musk's provocative statements about animal agriculture. We dug into the science, the politics, the potential impacts.
Yeah.
And we ended by talking about solutions, about the power of individual and collective action.
Right.
It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
And hopefully empowering as well.
Yeah, for sure.
What I hope listeners take away from this is a sense of hope, a feeling that they can make a difference because they absolutely can.
I couldn't agree more so to our listeners out there.
Yeah.
Remember, stay curious, stay informed,
Keep learning.
and keep diving deep.
For sure.
Your choices matter. Your voice matters.
Absolutely.
And together we can create a better future for ourselves and for the planet.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for listening. We hope you liked this episode. If you did, we'd really appreciate it if you could give us 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. Also, we would be so appreciative if you could just share this episode or this podcast with all your friends and family who are vegans or vegan friendly. We're also really excited because we are going to be launching something really cool pretty soon on the site, so keep an eye out for that. And we will see you really soon with a new episode.
Yeah.